TV now for 29 years, probably longer than some of you have been born, but that's okay. I really like what I do. I've had an opportunity to work various assignments. I've had an opportunity. I had Dope Dog back several years ago. It was a narcotics detection dog. I've worked vice. I've worked undercover. I bought dope. I've been a prostitute. On the job, not off duty, but and I've also had an opportunity to work surveillance, where I follow people. I've worked internal affairs where I followed cops who supposedly had done bad things. I've had an opportunity to work a detail called GHOST, which stands for Graffiti Habitual Offender Suppression Team, and that's officers that we would ride the trains, the buses. We're looking for kids who are out there, scribing, writing, doing graffiti, vandalizing. Rode on the trains and the buses, and got an opportunity to see how the security pitfalls of that, and then had a chance to work fugitive warrants, where we go after people who have like murder warrants and trying to hide from officers and different identities. Got a chance to work a couple of special details with FBI, working gangs, and I worked narcotics, like I said. I was the department's informant coordinator, where we would, people who wanted to work with the police department or law enforcement, and their identity was housed so that we could use them, so that for their safety. Had an opportunity to work patrol. I worked as a uniform supervisor, as a police officer. Now as a lieutenant, I work traffic. Traffic, I saw the other component about how important it is to have the safety in place, but then there's that traffic component that's part of your safety plan that we're going to talk about hopefully a little bit. And then now currently I am working a group called Major Crimes Division, and we handle all the high profile cases that develop. We were my unit and my center housed the investigators for the Dorner investigation. I'm sure we've all heard about him and his concerns, and that is called the Joint Regional Intelligence Center. It's here in Norwalk, and that center has various components. We have analysts, we have investigators, we have various law enforcements. We have folks from Long Beach PD, the Sheriff's Department, LAPD, Customs, LAX, Port Police, and you have the various groups working together so that when we have events, we can address it. Now what happens is, you're going to have an event, and part of law enforcement's responsibility is to find out if there's any concerns through terrorism or through chatter. We monitor the websites, we monitor some of the, like Occupy LA, we've all heard about. We listen to see what they're talking about if you're going to have an event, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But part of the security plan is listening to see if there's any controversial issues that are going to be brought up at your event. You're thinking about, I'm just going to have a good old volleyball, matchup, but your event might be the focal point for Occupy LA to come and protest and do all their, whatever it is that they want to, discuss. So that's that other part of your event that, you may not even be thinking about. So what we'll go through is, looks like a lot, and hopefully it's not too dry, but I really expect class participation. Ask me questions, and if I don't know, I'll say, hey, I don't know, but we'll find out. But my goal, of course, is to give you an awareness, talk about some prevention, talk about how to be prepared, and then how to respond to recover. My goal is to give you some things to think about. And then as we talk about some of these ideas and suggestions, I'm also going to include what I, as a law enforcement officer, am going to, how we're going to respond. For example, when you set up your volleyball tournament, you're looking about getting your players, getting the water, all the important things that you need to kind of get this thing going, getting the advertisement, getting the right, getting the right teams to play, setting it up in your categories. But then we have to look at this as being an successful event. The way it becomes successful is if nothing wrong happens, like having folks start fighting. Are you going to serve alcohol? Do you have the right contingency plans to prevent that from being a massacre? And like I talked about earlier, your event might be the focal point for some politically driven group to come and protest and make your event their cause. Because you're talking about maybe getting Channel 4, Channel 7, news media involved, which is great for you, but then it's also great for them because they're going to use your event to turn it upside down, and it's all going to be about them, not about you, not about your tournament. And we don't want your athletes who are going to be coming to this event to be part of somebody's agenda. So when we talk about awareness, we want to be talking about things that are going to be looked at through, for example, Homeland Security. So Homeland Security basically is what's happening here at home. The real basic points are, do you have a politically driven team? And I'll just throw this out. We know like in soccer, soccer is a very passionate sport for many countries. Ireland, they take great pride in their teams. I know some of the countries in Europe, there's a lot of passion when their teams are playing. So we want to be looking at, what kind of politically driven events will your event generate? Prevention, practicing we want to prevent something from happening before it actually gets there. So we want to set it up so that we can encourage this tournament to keep happening every year. We don't want this to be kind of like a one-hit wonder. It was great for that 1 year and then it blew out of the water because you didn't have the right contingency to secure your event. And then we want to be prepared with all the possibilities. And all the possibilities are what's going to happen around your event, security, the sales of tickets, and so forth. And then when we talk about response and recovery, can we have an incident, fix it, and still recover and move forward? So hopefully, again, we'll bring some ideas to you. Now, you set up your volleyball tournament, your benefit, your benefit here. These are the things that you might want to start looking at now, because when you set up your program, your security personnel, they're going to be looking at what's the site name, who's the owner, who's going to take responsibility, the address, and something that, latitude, longitude. Why are we asking for that? When, for law enforcement, whenever we call in air support, helicopter officers riding in piloting helicopters, they don't look at addresses. They want the lat and the long, because when they're setting up how to ride to your event, that's what they're looking at. Because you might be in the middle of, Wyoming, and it's Route 4 and it's Route 5, and you know where you're at, but if you're going to have resources coming in, that's exactly what they're going to need. So some of the points here, you might want to jot down, so when you set up your event, you're also addressing what law enforcement is going to be looking at when you come to us and say, okay, I'm going to have this event, I'm going to need some security, and this is what I got. If you kind of hit the bullets already, you're going to be ahead of the game, and it helps me kind of gauge how many officers I might need in the event that this thing goes ugly on us. And it also helps you to kind of plan what other resources you're going to need besides just, getting your volleyball teams together and making this thing work.
Hey Helen,
Yes.
When we talk about like going ugly, give us some examples. I can think of, is it 1972 Munich
Yeah.
Olympics?
Yeah.
I can think of that gone ugly.
Very
These
good.
students aren't going to know what I'm talking about, but can you talk about something that's gone ugly when it wasn't expected?
Yeah, the Lakers parade. I worked that thing when I was working the ghost detail. I was in plain clothes. What went ugly is we had underestimated what the potential of the crowd was, how they were going to react. Law enforcement, what we did is we failed to have additional resources available in high-profile positions. For example, when it went ugly, we lost a couple black and whites where people came, they firebombed black and whites. They tossed over a couple of the MTA buses. They literally had the city of LA in major gridlock. Cars couldn't go left and right, and if cars couldn't turn left and right, that means response units, fire department, emergency vehicles, we couldn't even get to those events. So we had to hustle from like 10 blocks away, park our cars, and run up to try to provide the security and the medical assistance that was needed just for like a 6-block radius around Staples Center. So that's something that was supposed to be a good thing, you figure parade, aftermath. That went ugly. What Cindy's talking about in this 72, I believe it was. It was the Olympics in Germany, and there was some terrorist acts against the athletes there, and unfortunately there were some casualties. But it was a lackadaisical type of mentality. Oh, nothing's going to happen. We're just having athletes in dorms, and there wasn't the precautions. And when they realized that this was actually a terrorist act, it took a long while for resources to come in. And what I'm getting at is if you can prepare for the what ifs with a basic outline of what you're going to need, you will be ahead of the game. And obviously, the game means being successful with your tournament, with your benefit. So what I'm going to be looking for is how big is your site? How many times a year do you plan to do this? Because that might mean that we have to budget, your event with law enforcement personnel or your security. How many people are going to be present during the event, number of employees, all that takes place. And the reason why I need to know that is because if we have law enforcement has to come in a tactical response, maybe there's somebody who is taking people hostage, maybe there's somebody who comes in with a gun, they start shooting people at your event, what happens to be a very innocent, tournament, becomes now, like I mentioned, a focal point of some kind of terrorist group or some nut with mental issues who all of a sudden wants to use your event to kind of vent. So again, these are some basic things that again law enforcement's looking at, and this is important. The purpose of the site, that's going to be very clear with your setup. Now, you got a lot to work with. You're trying to set up your tournaments, and now you're thinking, okay, shoot, I gotta worry about all this other stuff. No, let us worry about it. But the point is to be prepared to answer these questions in your format. Because if you have this already set up, then when you're being evaluated in your presentation, you're covering. There's a term called your inner circle and your outer circle. You want to be right on your inner circle, but your inner circle is going to be contingent that you have a good outer circle. That way your tournament can, do its thing, and you can get the accolades for having a well-organized event. But the point is, you've got to do your homework now, or later on, if it does go ugly, you will be looked at and saying by the media, by the people who are gonna probably sue you because you did not plan for this, because you will get sued. And I'm not an attorney, but I've been sued enough to know that if you prepare and in good faith, you do everything you can to ensure the safety of your clients, you will be okay. Yes, sir.
What about with like the Dodger Stadium stuff happening with kind of like the attacks there? Yeah, you can try and plan for it, but that's just almost like an on-instant thing. You can't really like react.
Right.
There's not really time to react to something like that. It just
Right.
happens.
Right, things do happen, but then we have to go back and look at what did we have in place and what we should have had in place. And Dodger Stadium realized that they had been cutting back on security, and their security was lacking, in my opinion, was lacking the integrity of providing a strong response. So if you look at Dodger Stadium for that incident, and we're talking about the gentleman from
Yeah.
San Francisco, if you look back from years prior, they had been cutting back security tremendously. And of course, something like that, if you're going to be an attorney and you're going to say, hey, 2 years ago you had, say, 40 security officers, now you only have 20, and had you had the 40, this wouldn't have happened. Those are some things that that is being reflected on in a negative way. I mean, if you try to cover all your avenues and be responsive to what's recommended. Now, obviously, everybody has a budget. If your budget says you can only have a certain amount of security, then you may have to downscale your tournament. So you have to have that equal balance, and I guess that's the point where we have to be looking at. You may want this grandioso tournament, but your pocketbook can't afford the outer perimeter that's needed. Someone to do your security, and that includes security at your ticket booths, security at your parking events, because again, that's where that incident happened. That was in the parking area outside of Dodger Stadium. So they had all the resources kind of in at the stadium itself, and not on the outer perimeter, and that's where they, unfortunately, that's where that happened. But good question. Anybody else? Again, this is kind of large scale threats to be worried about. You have an event. Things that we have to be looking at is aviation concerns. Are we looking at an area that you might have a problem with aviation? A lot of times what happens is we have helicopters that want to focus on your event. There's coordination that we have with the aviation folks with regards to no-fly zone. But usually that requires approval from Washington, D.C. It's kind of like asking to close the 5 freeway. You do not close the 5 freeway unless it's something major. Because what happens is, if the CHP ever closes the 5 freeway, they have to justify it, because they have to eventually answer to the governor why the 5 freeway was closed. If we have restricted airspace, for example, on the Dorner incident, when they had the shooting at the cabin, I think most of us have probably seen that. We had to put a restriction, no fly zone within, I think it was 3 miles of that, because we actually had law enforcement officers running around trying to secure the area, and we didn't want him to possibly be on television watching what our folks were doing. So, and that took approval from Washington, D.C., and that's a big deal.
How quickly does that approval happen in a situation like that? Is it instantaneous phone call? Is it a phone call?
It takes a phone call, and it could be instant. Probably, as far as what we have to do is we have to be able to justify it. We have to justify it that it's a life-threatening event. That the restriction will aid in the recovery of a suspect, or the recovery of possibly victims. But it has to be a life and death situation. Bottom line. So again, but that's something you might have to look at. If aviation might be a problem with your event, bombings, that could always happen. Now, we talked about you have a volleyball tournament, but both teams have political ties to maybe groups that might be known to be bombers. So again, in your plan, do you have you brought in the law enforcement officers? Do they know that maybe your group has some political ties that would be of an alert in itself, where maybe we have to bring bomb dogs and do a sweep of your tournament before you get going? So those are some concerns that, I would be looking at, but you have to let me know. We'll come and we'll assist you with that, but you have to be aware that it's not just, two teams playing at a tournament. And then we're also looking at biological materials. Biological materials is, again, those are some concerns that, they could put that into your food. The people that are selling the food, are they bonded? Have you done any kind of security checks? But again, those are the concerns that your security group leader would be responsible for. So it's not just having a tournament, because you're going to have food, you're going to have beer, you're going to have parking. You've got the other concern. You're thinking, oh heck, I just want to have a tournament. But this is the background. This is the outer circle that you have to be aware of. There's always a possibility of a chemical agent, and if you're doing some kind of a boating, maritime, there's always variations with that. But usually with maritime type of events, it's usually open water, and the only thing you have to worry about is having that waterway restricted, and that can usually be facilitated through like the Coast Guard. Yeah.
So when I'm assuming somebody calls like the LAPD and says, hey, we need security for this event, my volleyball event.
Mhm.
Do you guys basically come in and say, okay, well, they say, oh, I need 12 security. They're like, no, you need 20. Like, do you guys come in and tell them? Is there somebody at your office that does that?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
how
For
would I go
example,
about?
we're working right now on our May Day parade, which we have every year. I've worked on like the opening for Dodger Stadium. We're working on that right now, because the opening day for Dodger Stadium is a mess.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because what happens is, everybody wants to go to that first game. Everybody has their ticket. Everybody's all pumped up. So we're working on that contingency plan right now. What happens is Dodger Stadium says, look, we're anticipating, 50,000 people. And we have all these pre-planning meetings before your event happens, and we discuss, okay, this is what we expect you to provide. You need to have, 200 security officers. And then we, law enforcement, will supplement for the areas that become part of the city. We won't be your personal security officer, but we will assist you in figuring out, kind of like a little formula, what you're going to need to make your inner circle safe, and then we will take care of the outside for you. We'll help you with, traffic control. In the event that there's some kind of an incident, we've already got an idea that you're expecting 50,000 people. And then on that day, we as law enforcement, we max deploy our officers, because if this goes ugly, we gotta have enough officers to supplement supporting that ugly event if it happens.
So it's all really prevention. It's really all pre-planning things out.
Pre-planning and working with your local agency, because again, we have to be partners on this. We want you to be successful. We want you to have your event, but at the same time, you have to work with us so that we can plan with our personnel to complement what it is that you're planning on working on. And then there's always sabotage. That could happen anywhere. But the point is within your event is to get as much intelligence that we have as far as your players. Again, you may have a team that is very, very neutral in their political views, but you might have a student or a player that he's got like Kobe. Everywhere Kobe goes, there's always a crowd, right? And he could just be going to a restaurant. So if you have someone of that kind of caliber, you know, there is always that potential that that one person will draw in trouble. Not that they're trouble, but they may draw in that kind of attention. So again, we have to be flexible with your plan, and hopefully we know that up front. Okay, how to minimize loss of life and crime and terrorism. I always bring in the terrorism blend in, because you know, when we talk about terrorism, a lot of times people think, oh, that only happens in the Middle East, or that only happens in the South. We have terrorism right now here. You know, if you guys don't ever been reading the newspapers, and I know you have, is, you know, terrorism can be, you know, gang A and gang B coming to your event because their brother is the ace volleyball player. And now you've got, you know, I'll make it very simple. You have, you know, a gang from the east side, a gang from the south side. And really, they're there because of that one player. And those are some of the things that we want to talk about, because if we can identify that, then hopefully in our outer perimeter, we can hopefully prevent that from happening. Okay, this is how we're going to take it a step further. Okay, you've already got your volleyball tournament going, and all of a sudden, we've got someone who gets in there and is a Columbine type shooter. He's got you know, a couple of shotguns. Him and his buddy, they got a couple of 45s, and they start shooting your volleyball players. Okay, we're in the gym, and he's slaughtering everybody. He's shooting everybody up. Okay, so now what are we gonna do? We're going to call the police, right? Somebody's going to dial 911. Okay, so now 911, we get the call. This is how law enforcement, this is what we're thinking. Okay? This all came back. What happened is after Columbine, our department and several others, they evaluated what was occurring in this situation. You had some high school kids who had some extreme weaponry. They also had pipe bombs. They had extra ammo. They had shotguns. They had semi-autos, and besides their handguns. And they came in there, and they were planning to massacre as many people as they could. And they're shooting along the way, and they were not. It didn't appear that they were going to stop until they ran out of bullets or someone killed them. So we came up with a protocol that if we happen to respond to a school or a volleyball tournament and this is occurring, this is what we're going to do. And I'm only saying this because when you set your plan up, you have to understand that this is my job now. This is what I'm going to do as a law enforcement officer, and this is what we're going to do, and this is what I'm going to expect from you. So if you kind of understand where we're coming from, when we start asking you in your development of your outer perimeter security plan, you will understand hopefully why I'm going to ask these questions. You know how I talked about the lat and the long, because I'm going to be calling a helicopter, and if I already have that, they're already coming, because they're going to be giving me a bird's eye view of what I have. Okay, so my concern is officer safety. I'm going to be looking at hostages. I'm going to be looking at taking this person into custody. I'm going to be looking at who is shooting. We law enforcement, we're not going to, you know, and not to criticize anybody, but there was a lot of delay before they actually got into the school, and that delay caused loss of life. We as law enforcement, we're not going to wait. As soon as we get enough people, we're going to enter, and we're going to be looking for the shooter. So in your volleyball tournament, if we're going to expect for those people who can get cover, hide in a closet, hide under a desk, lock the doors, and that's something that maybe you guys can talk about later. Is what if we have somebody that comes in here and starts shooting, or shoots next door? What are you guys going to do? Guess what? There's only one way in and one way out. What are you guys going to do? You guys can talk about this later. But when I come in and I'm looking for this shooter, and I don't want seem to sound graphic, but my goal is to neutralize that person, stop them. Okay? So we're going to be coming in, we're going to be looking for this active shooter, and we're going to be expecting to have hostages, and I expect that my safety is going to be hampered by this perpetrator. So we're going to come in hot, we're going to be coming in with a mission to find that person. What happens is we have a group of officers who will come in, they'll do an entry, and as we come across victims, we'll try to escort them out of harm's way, or we may tell you just to stay where you're at. You might be safer where you're at. So again, when we talk about your volleyball tournament, you know, we have to be expecting that, okay, what if this does happen? Where are some safe zones for your players? And again, you don't have to bring this up with your teams when they come in, because you don't want them to get paranoid, but you as the coordinator, you should have an idea, you know, where you want to direct your people to go, hopefully out of harm's way for a bit.
Now, Helen, would that also fall under line where when we have big events like that, it's kind of the same protocol as a fire alarm goes off? You have a safe zone for a fire alarm, so that could be the same type of a scenario.
Yes.
Where it's in the same discussion framework?
Yes.
Okay.
Safety zones, where are areas where you can have your people, have your teams, you know, redeploy, so that you can keep track that they're not still inside, especially for the fire. And again, if it's a gym, usually it's, you know, a large gym, but you also have, you know, restrooms, you have areas that might not be visible. So again, having that contingency plan and having that safety plan in your discussion with the coaches, with the managers of those teams, that in the event that there's a fire, where do you want them to go? Because again, that shows that team that you're safety conscious, and also too, later on for liability, the fact that you discussed it, you know, will really help you when it comes down to lawsuits. Because it's kind of like, well, you didn't have a plan of action in place. Yes, I did. We discussed it in the event of a fire. This is where we would like for, you know, the coaches and the team to move to for say, or earthquake. Those type of events, you know, they come up, and that, it doesn't have to be a shooter, but it could be an earthquake, a fire, as Cindy mentioned. So again, as we're coming through, the fire department and the EMTs, they're not going to come in until we can secure that area. So, you know, we can have people, unfortunately, we can have people bleeding. We cannot bring in fire department until I can say that this area is clear. And most likely, we'll be moving those people out. So again, you being a coordinator, you're going to be helping us to coordinate to get these people out. So again, looking for an area for a safe zone would be well to your benefit. So again, as you're organizing, you have that contingency plan already in place. Let's see. Okay, so we have someone who maybe decides that they want to do this kind of event. You know, do you have metal detectors in place with your security team? Is that needed? I mean, what if it's just a high school event? We've had situations where at football games, you know, teams come in, you know, a good football game, ends up being a good match, and all of a sudden someone pops up with a gun. Do you have that in place? Does your security team have that in place? That's something you want to discuss. You know, the wands always work, or if you have to, you know, the security team will pat those people down. It's okay to talk about it. And then too, your athletic bags, your teams that are coming in, are you checking their bags for weapons? You know, doesn't mean that the shooter or the person who's going to cause trouble at your event is as a spectator. It could be a team member, because we've seen plenty of YouTube videos where it's the team members that are causing the incident, not just the spectators. Okay, I'll throw this out there. InfraGard. InfraGard is a program that is funded by the FBI, and it encourages the private sector to work with them. So those of you who are going to go on and be coordinators later on, you might want to look into that, you know, in that time future. When you are the manager of Staples Center, you might want to be part of InfraGard. And I'm just throwing this out there because, again, those are some organizations that works with private industry, that works with trying to help you develop a good security measure. And it's nice to have their insight. There's probably, within this region, probably over 2,000 private industry members. Staples Center is one of them, where they're part of this group that works within the security and develops ideas on how to help the smaller private companies with their security measures. It doesn't have to be a sporting event. It could be, you know, Xerox. Let's see, high profile controversial events. Okay, give me an idea about some high profile sporting events that you guys can think of.
All-Star Game. All-Star Game.
All-Star Game, anything else?
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl. Why do you think they're high profile?
So many people want to go to.
Yeah, something that people want to go to. The news media is all over it, right? There's not only local, we're talking international, right? And what a perfect event to be some person that wants to complain about, you know, using animals as test pilots for makeup or perfume. You know, we got the PETA people, right? You know, they come out and, you know, and they usually like to, you know, throw red dye on the actors and actresses on their mink coat because, you know, you're killing animals. And again, so again, anything that's high profile is going to cause a lot of attention. So with that, you have to be looking at people within that arena who are automatically going to cause a heightened alert. And again, we talked about having your outer perimeter with security in place. You have to be looking at dates. Dates are very important. Some religious groups, for example, Easter is a very high-profile religious day. You're going to have a tournament on that day. So again, sometimes not that your tournament is going to cause an issue, it's just the fact that you had it on Easter. So you might want to look at that, you know, is there any controversy with the date? 9/11. I don't know, say you want to have a tournament on 9/11, is that going to be an issue for your players, for your spectators, and for anybody who might be participating in that, on that event, just because it's 9/11?
Helen, does the World Baseball Classic, it was here 2 years ago, I think, in Anaheim.
Mhm.
Does that cause for extra security with, I guess one of the major pieces that always happens there is the Cuban baseball players defect.
Yes.
They're scared of them defecting to the United States and staying. Does that bring more security concerns for you?
Yeah, it brings more concerns because there's always the potential that someone's going to say, hey, I want a political asylum. And we as security, we have to have that contingency in place.
Okay.
So yes, it does. And again, based on the type of event and what you're expecting to bring, it would be good to develop it, pre-plan it, that if it does happen, what are we going to do? What do we expect you to do? And then it gives me a chance to kind of work on what my plan's going to be so that we can, you know, address it without any kind of backlash or any kind of issues. Okay, we talked about the date of the event that coincides with like an anniversary of some kind of, you know, political group or, you know, Columbine type of incident. What other incidents out there do you think might be of a security issue?
Grammys.
Grammys, yeah. Very much so. We worked on the Oscars and the Grammys, my group, as far as providing the intelligence on, are we hearing anything? Are there any specific groups that want to do any kind of demonstrations? And again, freedom of speech is totally allowable. There's constitutional rights that defend that. But when their demonstration affects security and or safety of people, then that becomes it becomes a crime. So yes, sir.
What about like high school graduations? You guys have like, because I know at least when in San Diego there was a problem with like there was a lot of people going around like was when Proposition 8 was in the voting against gay marriage, and they were going around like high school graduations like God hates fags and stuff like that. Basically and the police were stopping because they weren't letting them just say that. So I didn't know if that was something you guys dealt with.
We will respond if we get for example, if you're anticipating that, or if we know from our intel that hey, there's going to be a group that's going to probably disrupt your event, then yeah, we'll participate in that. And our goal would be is to give you the right to do your graduation, but at the same time, we also have to we kind of walk a fine line because they have a right to protest. They have a right, freedom of speech. But when it becomes criminal, where their actions affect the safety of the stakeholders, meaning you, then it could be a trespass, or it could be if they start vandalizing, because a lot of the labor groups, it starts off peaceful, and then all of a sudden they're slashing tires. Now it's a crime. That's not acceptable. Then people go to jail. So the freedom of speech is no longer valid anymore. But did I answer your question?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
You guys don't really have to deal with it.
Yeah. And again, freedom of speech is such a fine line. So again, just be aware that your sporting event, how big, how small, may attract a political group. And the best way to address it is to have a good plan. That if it does happen, what are you going to? How are you going to work it? Yes, sir.
How do you guys put together how many officers you need based on the number of people that you're expecting?
We would be worried about the outer perimeter. So if you had, for example, we'll say a group of say 10,000, and the concern is more of a traffic. We'll probably have between probably on the average depends on where your critical spots are. So we'd have to look at your plan. We'd have to look at the surrounding area. I'll use Dodger Stadium for example. Dodger Stadium on opening day, we have Department of Transportation. We have officers that direct traffic. Okay. And they're going to be at critical spots, for example, like the major intersections, like at Elysian and Sunset, because that's a chokehold that goes straight up into the park. And we don't want to have gridlock, so we will actually post a person there to direct traffic. When we do that, we usually have 2 uniform officers there to assist them, because a lot of times, our traffic, because they're not armed, the traffic control officers, so we don't want them to be victims of crime. So we will So, for example, if you do the math for me, we have 25 critical spots, okay, so that's 24 officers directing traffic, and then I have to post 2 officers with that 1 traffic control officers is how many?
40.
So about 50 officers. So it depends on what you have for critical spots. And for example, some spots, let me give you a better one. When we had the May Day Cinco de Mayo parade, which basically is generated by the labor groups, when they marched, we literally had probably about 300 officers assigned to various points within that route. Because what ends up happening is, if it affects traffic, if your event affects traffic, you have to, we have to have a plan for the traffic, so, because we cannot, just let people just drive, in and out, because it's gonna be a congestion. People get upset, people start fighting, you know, you cut me off. So if we can control traffic, your event will run smoothly. It'll be a success because first thing people say, hey, it took me 20 minutes to find parking and I missed the first inning of the game. And that happens at Dodger Stadium
Every year.
every year. Sometimes people miss like half
Sometimes
the
it's
game.
an hour to
Yeah.
find parking to opening day.
Yeah, opening day is usually pretty bad. And then, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So do you guys have a particular say in like how many officers or how many security personnel are in the inner cup? Like just walking around and just being like with a ticket booth and things that will need protection? Do you guys supply the numbers for that or is that on the people hosting the event?
It's on the people holding the event. That inner perimeter is yours.
So that's a private security company kind of thing?
Yes, yes, private security. And then law enforcement will maintain the outside
Everything
perimeter.
else outside. Okay, that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
If the inside is on you guys.
We'll make recommendations, you know,
For
based on
companies.
your team, on your layout if you want. You know, how many officers do we think we need? Before I can answer that question, I'd have to look at your plan and say, okay, you know what? At your ticket booths, you might wanna have, you know, a couple security officers there because you're dealing with money. At the alcohol beverage, you might wanna have maybe 1 or 2 security officers because again, when people, drink too much, you know, they want more. And, you know, if you tell that person, hey, I'm sorry, but you had too much to drink, they get upset and they wanna fight because I want more beer. So you gotta have you have the security to tell that person, sir, you know, we're not gonna serve you anymore. And then, you got the guy that's in the, you know, the special seating, cause, you know, he's somebody and he gets drunk and then he starts throwing beer and he starts causing a ruckus. You have to have a security, team to take that person out and tell them, hey, you're getting kicked out. Because now, you know, now you're gonna have a fight. So to answer your question, we can make recommendations, but for the most part, the inner portion is your private security. Yes, sir.
Is there a certain ratio you suggest, like 1 police officer to every 15 people?
On the average, probably about 1 to 20. And it depends on what kind of crowd you have. If you have an opera type group, you know, and I'm talking your inner circle, your private
Yeah.
security, probably 1 to 20. But again, we have to look at your critical spots. Ticket booths are critical because you got money. The alcohol parts, you know, you want to have a high visibility there, just to ensure that doesn't become your focal point for trouble.
What if it's outdoors?
If it's outdoors, it would depend on your surroundings, but for the most part, as long as you can space out your security so it's high visibility, and if you have a good group, you know, like maybe the Greek theater, I think their ratio is like 1 to 20, something like that. But they do have more folks up at the ticketing, and they have quite a bit of security in their parking arenas. So parking arenas, you know, and you can get away a lot with having a security officer, you know, who's got like maybe his security jacket, you know, roving around like in a golf cart, because it gives that appearance you've got more than what you have, and we do that a lot. We have a lot of roving units where they're not just a fixed post. Fixed post means you stay there until you get relieved, but roving means they're moving around. You might give them like, okay, between these 3 rows of parking, this is where you stay. So it gives an impression that there's a lot of you and there really isn't. So.
Now, Helen, when you say roving, what are some, I've seen police officers on bicycles.
Yes.
I've seen horseback.
Yes.
I've not seen golf carts, but that's a good one. Do you guys have those portable people mover things too?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, what else?
You have that, bikes. You might even have like a footbeat where officers, stay within a certain area, and that's exclusively their property. That's where they focus their security efforts on. And again, you try to maximize that appearance, that image, if there's more of you than what you really have. We have these, they're like an all-terrain golf cart, with the little wider tires, and then we also have them, set up with the large PA system. So we can tell people to, okay, you need to keep moving, or, and have that audio, capabilities to kind of disperse crowds. Because what happens is, and part of security's responsibility is to keep people moving or keep people comfortable. So if you have groups of people like at a Rose Bowl, we'll do a tailgate party. That's something where you might want to have a lot of roving, people on the people movers or bikes, because again, you have groups that are just hanging out, and you have to give that appearance that you're monitoring their activity. Because again, and even when you do that, they start fighting because they're drinking. But those are just some basic concerns that will help you to kind of maximize what little resources you have. Is keeping your security teams, visible, high visibility. Let's see. Okay, major crowds are always an issue. Major crowds, but again, what kind of crowd do you have? And without generalizing, if you have a large crowd like at the Greek Theater, it depends. Are we listening to a punk rock group, or are we listening to some piano concerto, and the group is very mild? You can adjust your numbers for your security based on that. So it's kind of like, we have to look at the crowd, how many people, and demographics. Yeah, you have to. That's what I'm looking at, because you're not trying to prejudge people, but you kind of have to have a feeling. Are we talking about a bunch of 5-year-olds? Or are we talking about a bunch of 19-year-olds who are maybe serving alcohol? We got to worry about people's IDs and so on and so forth. So again, your audience, age, gender, it's all part of trying to contemplate what kind of security numbers you need, and where are you going to put your security folks. And that's just so you can have a successful event. So you're looking at, God, I just want to have, a tournament, but you've got all these other things you have to really look at, because it's going to affect your tournament. And I hate for you to have to close your tournament down because there's a fight in the parking lot, and there's people are starting to riot and throw chairs and so on and so forth. So again, kind of doing the homework before. Do your homework before, and trying to cover all the bases. And the bases are very, they're all moving parts. So, but the point is, and I'll say this again, is work with your security coordinator, and then when you have before you have your tournament, work with law enforcement, so that we can start gauging, so we can have enough people for your event.
Now, Helen, does it make a difference to you from the security standpoint if the event is mostly children under the age of 18? What changes do you make, or what should the managers make for kids?
For managers, for managing kids and that kind of grouping, is we have to be looking at kids are going to get lost. We're going to have concerns with possibly maybe some crimes against children. So again, we're going to be looking for, we may have more security, like maybe in and around the bathrooms. Because a lot of times parents, it's just a child's theater, movie. It's okay if Johnny goes to the restroom by himself. But we all know pedophiles look for those kind of events. So I would probably have, security close to the restroom, so if Johnny does go to the bathroom, he doesn't have to be worried about being a victim of some kind of, of a crime. So with that, we'll be looking at what kind of events children might be victim of. But you're always going to have the child that's lost. And then when we have those kind of events, we're always looking at if we do have a child that's lost, and we have to, in a sense, lock the ensuring that we have enough, hopefully video cameras, because again, we're gonna be looking at cameras where he was sitting, he went to the restroom, all of a sudden he's gone, cause that's gonna be, something that we would be, highly recommending is some video cameras, just to help with, monitoring the group, as it goes through its phase of watching the event, in the event that we have a lost child. And then, with the, something under the age of, 12, hopefully they have to have a parent, they can't just, let the child come in by themselves, because again, there's gonna be safety concerns, and usually that's not a problem, but for the most part, it is addressing that we have, enough security for a lost child. Let's see, married to children. Rental strollers. Okay, so you have an event, and you're gonna have kids, strollers. One of the things that we like to see, and I think they do it very well at some of the, I know Staples has it, they have like the stroller lot, where the parents can, put the strollers up, because it becomes a fire hazard, and usually you want to have again, that's part of your security contingency plan, is to have an area so that the mother, father who brings their small child to come watch your event, has somewhere to put their stroller. Something so simple becomes a big issue, because then they try to put the stroller in the seats, and then now it becomes a hazard, because if there's a fire, people can't get through, and I've seen this where they get the stroller and they decide that they get upset and they throw the stroller at the, their favorite baseball player. Things, it happens. So again, strollers can be weapons. So, but for the most part, it's the little things that you want to look at. Let's see. Childcare depends on the event. If you have childcare, do you have enough security so if little Johnny goes to the childcare while you're having this tournament, that Johnny doesn't walk off with the wrong parent? Do you put the little labels on that this is Johnny belongs to Helen, that's my son, versus just is that your mom? Oh, okay, and then you let them go. Again, I've seen kind of like let me think. There was I went to, I think it was Angel Stadium. Don't they have something like that up there?
Have a kid zone,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but the parent needs to be with the kid at the kid zone, but yeah, I know what you're talking about, where all the games are.
Yeah, and I don't think you have little tabs or.
If they play the games, yeah,
Okay.
but they're not to be left there is the key,
Yeah.
but some people just let their kids just go.
Yeah. And that becomes a problem all by itself.
Absolutely.
Credentials. Okay, now you got your tournament, you got all your security, yada yada, you're all ready to go. Okay, who's going to be allowed to come into where the players are playing? The Academy Awards was as a good example that I'll give you. Even though LEPD, we all have our IDs. Okay, we're gonna walk through, and I'm LEPD, and I think I'm gonna go from. We had it set up in sectors. So just because you had ID to be at the Academy Awards doesn't mean you have the authority to be backstage. So every section, we had it set up in zones. So you may have authorization and credentials to be there, but not in a specific zone that would again affect the security of the backstage personnel. There are some actors that thought, okay, I'm a high-profile actor, I'm going to give an award. I can just go back there. No, they were restricted. And again, so you might want to think about that for your tournament. just because you're an athlete and just because you're a player, do you get a chance to go in the locker room where another team is playing? Coaches, do the coaches get a chance to go into the locker room even though their team's not playing? So again, how are you going to do record checks? And record checks could be as extensive as, you know, I don't know, maybe you want to, maybe you have a tournament where you have young children, and maybe the concern is that, you know, you might have some folks that might be sexual deviants, and they might have a criminal record that would restrict them from being around children. Those are your safety concerns. Do you have, we already talked about this, at various levels of access. You know, just because you're a coach, you have the right to be in the locker room when your team's not playing. And who's going to check that? And who is going to authorize the production of your credentials? Who is going to format what they're going to look like? You know, red zone, green zone, purple zone, or do you, again, things that you want to, are you going to put a picture on it? Who's going to take the picture? And, you know, some people are pretty good. They'll go to these passport places and they'll take a picture and then they'll plaster it onto their ID and you know, it's them, but it's not something that you've formatted. Who is going to keep track of your database? So, say for example, I lost my ID, but I'm supposed to be there. Okay, so you have somebody check the database. Yeah, you know, Helen Lopez, she's supposed to be here. Yeah, she has access to zones 1 and 2, but I'm trying to get into 3 and 4. Not. So again, things that you want to think about within your presentation. You know, it doesn't have to be all that dramatic. You know, you might just be, you know, fine having it. You have a jersey, that's good enough. You can come in. You can come in and partake in the event. That's all you need. Or you need some kind of a, you know, jacket, or you got tennis shoes. Oh, okay, you must be an athlete, so we'll let you in. If that's what you want, but again, you have to establish what the rules are for who should be at the tournament and who should be in areas that are going to be of concern. Because again, if I'm a player, I should just be worried about playing. I shouldn't have to worry that, you know, I'm going to have somebody come in who's going to violate my person, or, and again, now we're talking about the news media. The news media always wants to get in, and they think, and pretty much have the latitude to come in and talk to the players. Again, do you have that, you know, established if you're doing a professional lineup? And, you know, even Staples Center, they all have their credentials. So again, it's nothing that's new to the program.
And Helen, one thing, you know, as an example to breach of security, and again, this is way before your guys' time, I'm going to date myself here. 1998, 1999 possibly, Monica Seles in the French Open was attacked. You remember that? Anybody? No? American tennis player was attacked sitting there on the bench at the French Open. Some guy stabbed her with a knife. Who would have thought the French Open televised event, major security, breach in security, this guy gets through with a weapon, and really set the stage for her future career, and you know, kind of didn't do so well playing wise ever since then. Always felt as though, and she did many interviews about it, she always felt her safety was in jeopardy and always felt unsafe playing from then on out. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, it really is. You know, how many of us they'll have like the bloopers or something on video, you know, make fun of videos. But you get the guy who goes out there and flashes everybody. You know, you think about it. Did he come in naked and just had the raincoat, or did he start taking his clothes off? So, you know, your security should have been saying, hey, this guy's taking his clothes off. He's going to do something silly. So, and they're actually able to get into the field and run across you know, from like home base to center field, that's a long way, naked, you know, so you gotta think about it. And security's just standing there, or do we have a plan? What are we gonna do with this guy, you know? So again, it could be something as, you know, funny as that, as having somebody, you know, streaking across. It happened several times at the Academy Awards, where a guy was actually behind stage and was able to go back there and, you know, shake himself and do his thing. And how did he get through? You know, you have to wonder. Again, lack of security. And that's why I'm thinking that had the credentials been set up back then, he wouldn't have gotten to that point. He wouldn't have gotten to that critical zone. Yes, ma'am.
What's the punishment for that?
It's probably a misdemeanor charge,
Oh, okay.
which is probably, you know, for most of us, kind of like, oh, you know, silly him. But he didn't care. He wanted to tell his buddy, hey, you see me on TV, I was on the Academy Awards and I was shaking my stuff, and, you know, it's kind of like, you know, he can go down in history in his own book and say, hey, my book says I was a streaker at the Academy Awards in, you know, 1980 or something. So, again, that was his agenda, you know. You and I would think and go, you know, I don't want people to see me naked, right? You know, I want to be known for something more positive. But you know, for him, maybe that was, no pun intended, that was his climax, right? So anyway, credentials. You know, think about it. Have something in place. Ticketing. Okay. You got this great event going. What are you gonna do about tickets? Are you gonna have pre-sales? If you have pre-sales, you know, how are you going to have them numbered? You know, how are you going to? I really like advanced ticketing, because then you can kind of forecast, you know, how many people you're expecting, and then that helps with our security assessment. And then what we always recommend, especially like with the opening of Dodger Stadium and some of these other events, is if you have pre-sales, designate a parking spot for these people. Because the worst thing, you know, like a lot of us, you get there and you're like, where am I supposed to park? Or they park where they want to park, and that becomes a traffic issue. And you know, you multiply that times, you know, 40,000, that's a lot of people that are trying to, you know, figure out a place to park. So try to relieve the stress level of your client. Try to relieve the stress level on your venue and your security. You know, pre-sales, people know where they're going to sit, they know where they're going to park. That's half the battle. Let's see. You know, toilets, really. If you're maxed out of capacity and you're expecting a full group, you know, can you facilitate restrooms, handicap restrooms? The Disabilities Act, you're expected to have that available to folks who have wheelchair access, the ramping. But again, you might already be in an established event where you're going to have ramps and so forth. But again, look at the little things, restroom, and you know, part of the, because you know, you don't want to be at a sporting event, and it happens at Dodger Stadium, and you're going to miss 3 innings, especially the women's restroom. You're going to miss 3 innings because you have to go to the bathroom, and there's a line. And a lot of it is because it's not the considerations aren't there. And I know they've done some improvements on that.
Some.
But
They're still working on it.
It's the little things. So think about that. Now, say your events at a park, okay? Because you know you've got a low budget. You might want to bring in porta potties to make it relieve the pressures of your client. And again, think about the porta potties that are handicap ready. You know, they're a little bit wider, and that way folks get their wheelchairs in. That makes a big difference, because I've actually read lawsuits where some folks will go to events who are handicapped, and this is, I'm using this in a very general term, to see if you do have handicap available restrooms. And then when you don't, then they sue you, say, you know what, you had this event, you knew it was gonna you were gonna have all these people, and there wasn't one handicap available restroom for me. So, I'm sure Cindy will talk about that later, but
Yeah.
again,
I've seen it. That's their main agenda, is
Yeah.
to show up to big, large-scale events and to find the manager on duty. And that's their first mode of attack, is
Yeah.
there's no bathroom, there was no seating for me. Who do I talk to? Who is my lawyer gonna send the letter to?
Right.
And that's in their first conversation.
and they do that, they look for that, yeah, they look for that. So again, be prepared, that's, again, that's an agenda on some of these, events that will take place. If it's feasible, if you could stagger the crowd, sometimes you can, because if the game starts at 9 o'clock, everybody's gonna get there early and they're gonna, if you can. And sometimes it helps, again, with the pre-sale of tickets, is to be able to kind of stagger, okay, from, your parking pass allows you to come in at, 7:30 to 8, and then the next group, if you can, but, sometimes it doesn't happen that way. And of course, the idea is to avoid the congestion at the entrances, because again, whenever people are stagnant at one area, experience has told me, and you could probably look it up, and I'm comfortable saying this, whenever you have people just standing in one area waiting to get into the same, you're gonna have more friction, you're gonna have someone, hey, he got in front of me, I was waiting, and how come he got in front of me? And, or somebody's gonna say something that offends somebody behind them, and next thing you know is, why did you say that about that kind of person, and tension, because everybody's excited to get in, and everybody's excited to get out, everybody's pushing, and come on, let's go, and so again, those are whenever you have those kind of chokeholds, areas of concern, you're more likely to have fights, or, I've heard, we've had this so many times, girls in front, guy bumps her, oh, he's trying to grab me, and then the boyfriend gets upset, why'd you grab my girlfriend, and then there's a fight, and he's laughing because he's probably a victim of that, right? I'm just kidding. So again, you have to look at that, so if you can keep people moving, that's why the airport's have those people movers. If you keep them moving, they've got something to do. You gotta think about that. Let's see. I pulled that up, but there is and that talks about the San Francisco gentleman at Dodger Stadium. If you guys want to, write that down, look it up. There's a Fox News has a good video on the event, and they talk about some of the security concerns. But anyway, bottom line is, if you can plan an event, and if you in good faith cover some of the basic things that we talked about, and you provide as much accommodations for your clients, you're gonna do well. Because, you'd like to hopefully have this event again, and you're gonna be a sports manager, coordinator, and you wanna have the job, you wanna be able to plan things. And just like anything, time management is gonna be a very important concept. If you have a date, look at your, having a calendar and setting up pre-planned dates with your security teams, with your managers, with your parking people, whoever is involved in your event, bring them into the fold, make them part of your team, because your success is going to be out of your hands, really. You need that support from those other entities, the folks that sell tickets, the folks that do your website, to provide as much information so that when your customer reads it and hey, I wanna go to the sporting event, they have all that information up front. But again, if you look at it ahead, you should be okay. You should be okay.